Okay. And another reason why I decided to do this video here is because I don't see too many videos concerning this here from a lot of these camps. And I'm talking about very huge camps, big camps, right? I don't see anyone doing a video concerning these things, which is dealing with the true lineage of the Israelites, right? I guess because, just like I said before, you got a lot of these people who's mixed in ethnicity talking about their Israelites, and they're just causing a whole lot of confusion among the camps, man, in the community, the Israelite community, that is. So it's like we don't know who's who, all right? But when you dig into the history of certain people of the world, right, which is the so-called Native Americans or the Mexicans or whatever, okay, or the Hamitic nations, all right, you'll come to see that the so-called natives and the Mexicans, their customs sort of relate more to the ancient Hamitic people rather than the Israelites, man. Right? And then you have these people claiming that they're Israel, all right, but they're bringing all of these pagan customs into the community, right? Burning sage, right? Idolizing your ancestors, okay? Calling on the so-called Great Spirit, all right? Doing rain dances, right? You saying that the full moon is the new moon, okay? That's a Hamitic culture, a pagan Hamitic culture, man, right? The book of Numbers, chapter 1, and we're going to start at verse 2, and it read, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel and their families by the house of who? Their fathers. Okay, it didn't say the mothers. But just like I said, that doesn't mean that the mother doesn't partake in this, because we need the woman to reproduce, all right, with her fertile eggs, all right? But the seed still follows the dad, right? As you can see here, it's all through the dad's lineage, right? With the number of their names, every what? Male by their poles. Okay, it didn't say female, males. All right. Verse 3. From 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel, thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. Okay. Verse 4. And with you there shall be what? A man, all right, of every tribe, every one head of the household, right, of his fathers, okay, or as it's written here, head of the house, but also you can say household too, and then it says of his fathers, all right. So right there, that's letting you know that everything is concerning the man, all right, when you're dealing with scripture. Let's jump down to verse 16, and it read, These were the renown of the congregation, what? Princes, all right, of the tribes of their who? Their fathers, heads of thousands in Israel, okay? So this is talking about men, once again, princes. Who's a prince? A man, all right? Of course, you see here fathers, which is a man, all right? Heads of thousands in Israel, okay? Not women, men, right? Verse 17. And Masha and Aaron took these men, all right, which are expressed by their names, verse 18. And they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, all right. And they declared their pedigrees after their families, okay. How? By the house of their who? Their fathers, all right, according to the number of their names from 20 years old and upward by their polls. Okay, so that's letting you know when you become a man, according to the biblical scripture, you have to be 20 years old. Now, in this society here, they tell you that you have to be 18, okay, for the woman, and 20 for the man. All right, but right here, this is letting you know right here, it's 20 for everyone. All right. Now, technically, in this society here also, it's 18 for both genders, male and female. All right. But right here, it's letting you know 20 years old. That's when you become a man. That's when you're able to go to war. All right. Now, unfortunately, when you judging by this right here, okay, you have a lot of young men that's fighting in this war for this country, for this government, who's not even 20 years old yet. Right? I have family members that's in the military that joined the military when it was like 18, 19 years old. Okay, but according to the biblical scripture, you're not even supposed to be thought of to be put in war when you're around that age, man. You're still young. That's still young, man. 18 years old. When I see an 18-year-old little kid or a little boy or little girl or whatever, they still look like babies, man. They look very young. Some of them barely even have facial hair. But, this government says that if you're 18, you can go to war. They throw an AK-47 or AR-15 in your hand and tell you to go to work, right? They send you overseas somewhere. It's like we're in war right now against Iran, supposedly, right, with the UN. All right, they got a lot of kids over there that's 18, 19 years old. They're not even 20 years old yet, man, and they're fighting a war, right? They could get their head blown off every minute, right? Someone can throw a bomb in their tank or whatever, right? Or in their army SUV as they're traveling along the desert or whatever. And it could be a roadside bomb, right? Blow them to pieces, man. 18 years old, right? But according to the biblical scripture here, man, it says you have to be 20 years old, okay? So that just goes to show that's another anti-biblical thing that's going on here in this society here, man, right? So back to it. Verse 19, as the Most High Power commanded Mashah, so he numbered them in the wilderness of Sinai. All right. Let's go to chapter 2, still in the book of Numbers. Okay. And we're going to start at verse 1. And it read, and the Most High Power spake unto Mashah and unto Aaron, saying, verse 2, every man, all right, of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard with the ensign of their what? Their father's house. Okay, not the mother's house, their father's house. Far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. All right. So right there, that's cut and dry, letting you know that it's still of the dad, the lineage, right? Let's go to verse 32. And it read, these are those which are numbered of the children of Israel by the what? The house of their fathers. All those that were numbered of the what? The camps throughout their hosts were 600,000 and 3,000 and 550. All right. Verse 33. But the Levites were not numbered among the children of Israel, as the Most High commanded Moses. Why? Because they was the priests. Okay. They didn't have no business at war. Their war was the spiritual warfare. Okay. Their job was over the tabernacle. Okay. So they wasn't fighting the physical war, but they was fighting the spiritual war. All right. Verse 34. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Most High Power had commanded Mashah. So they pitched by their standards, and so they set forward every one after their families according to the what? The house of their fathers, their dad dues, man. The daddy, the pappy. All right. the seed of man. Okay, so right here, this is letting you know, right? And this right here is only concerning the first couple of scriptures that I'm going to bring out, man. Right? So right here already it's letting you know, man, in the scripture, in the Torah, in the so-called Tanakh, right? It's letting you know that we go through the lineage of the dad, man. The man, okay? Not the mom. That's not to discredit the mom. That's not to disgrace the mom. But simply, just like I said before, if you believe in these holy scriptures, man, wholeheartedly, if you believe in the Bible, if you believe the Most High, right, if you're following Christ wholeheartedly, then you would understand that the lineage of the dad, man, okay, not by a woman, the man, okay, numero uno, all right. So this is what we're talking about tonight, man, right? Let's get back into it. Verse 34 again from the bottom. According to the house of their fathers, man. All right. Let's go to chapter 3, still in the book of Numbers. And we're going to jump down to verse 11. And it read, And the Most High spake unto Moses, saying, verse 12, And I, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel instead of all the firstborn that opened the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore, the Levites shall be mine. Okay, so this is what the Most High said. It's like I said before. The job of the Levites was to control the temple. Okay, the spiritual warfare, right? Verse 13. Because all the firstborn are mine, for on the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of bondage, which is Egypt, right? I hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast shall they be. I am the Most High power. All right, verse 14. And the Most High spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, verse 15, Number the children of Levi after the house of their fathers, okay, by their family, every male from a month old and upward shalt thou number them. All right, so right here, once again, reiterating the male, the man, the father. All right, verse 16. And Moses numbered them according to what the word, all right, of the Most High power, right? Just like I said, you know, I'm not just speaking out of the side of my neck or how I feel or what I think, okay? All of this right here is scriptural, man, right? As he was what? Commanded, okay? Not a choice, okay? Not what Moses think, all right? Or how he figured things should go. Okay, how he was commanded of the Most High to do, man. All right. Let's go to the book of Genesis, chapter 15. Okay, so here we go in the book of Genesis, chapter 15. And we're going to jump right on down to verse 12. All right. And it read, And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, right? Which was later turned to Abraham or Ibrahim, right? And lo, and horror of great darkness fell upon him. Verse 13. And he said unto Abram, Know for a surety that thy what? Thy seed, okay? Thy seed, all right? Seed lineage, okay? Shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them what? 100 years. All right. Does that sound familiar? Okay. Something that our ancestors went through, not only in ancient so-called Egypt, which is known as bondage, but in this present day spiritual Egypt. All right. And I say spiritual, it's because the people that was there back in that time spiritually and physical souls are here today. All right, reincarnated. Right, so that's the reason why it's called spiritual Egypt. Not because they're worshiping Egypt. Not only are they worshiping Egypt in the spirit too, but spiritually they are reincarnated back into these people today that have our people in captivity today. Right, so those are the reasons why it's called spiritual Egypt. All right. Verse 14. And also that nation, all right, which is the people that have the children of Israel in captivity, right, or the descendants of Abraham right here, or Abraham, all right, whom they shall serve, will I what? Judge, okay? Judge, meaning destroy, all right? And afterward shall they come out with great substance. Okay, who's the they? That's talking about the people of the Most High Man, the chosen people, the so-called Negroes, Hispanics, Native Americans, and Seminole Indians of Negroid descent only. All right. Verse 15. And thou shalt go to what? Thy fathers. Okay, it didn't say they mothers. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. Okay, who's this speaking about? This speaking about Father Abraham. All right. Verse 16. But in the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, meaning that the Most High is going to redeem us, right, after the fourth generation. So if you want to count the fourth generation, right, according to today's timing, okay, that would be probably what's the average years of man, right? The Most High, according to the biblical scripture, he promised us 70 years or more, right? If we're living righteously, if we're keeping the law, statutes, commandments, and living a righteous life, okay, he promised us 70 years, okay? So that will be one generation. Then you have some people, they live to 80. Some people live to 90. Some people live to 100, right? Personally, I have a neighbor who's 94, I believe, right? Or she will be 94 in August. Okay, so some people are promised more years. I had family members that lived well into their 90s, right? Grandmom on my mom's side, she passed when she was close to 90. I think she was 88, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then also my grandmom on my dad's side, she lived well into her 80s, her late 80s, right? So some people are granted more years than 70 years. You know, their mindset towards the Most High, if they're living a righteous life or not. You know, if they so-called good person in the eyes of the Most High, right? So that's what you would call a generation, okay? You can count from 70 to 90 years. Some people go into 100, right? I have some family members that I really don't know personally so well that I've heard to live into the hundreds, right? That's a part of my, you know, my mom's lineage, right? As far as I know, right? You know, according to the last name that was given to our family, okay, lived well into the 100 years, man, right? But, you know, those are different lineages within the last name that we share, you know, but in different men that was in the family, or different mothers too, right? But, you know, of course, you have a lot of people that, you know, we call family nowadays that have the same last name as ours, but, you know, they're from different branches of the tree, okay? But we share the same name. But just like I said before, you know, I've heard of family members, you know, going well into the hundreds, man, well into the hundreds, right? But, you know, I digress from that. So that's what you would call a generation, you know, from 70 to 90 years. So if you go 4 generations from that, you know, that's 70, 140, okay, 210, all right, and then you got 280, right? 280 years. That's 4 generations, all right, give and take, right? That's counting from 70 years according to the biblical scripture. But if you want to go to 100 years or whatever, or 90 years, okay, that would be 480 years with 90 years. All right. So that goes according to, that age bracket, that your ancestors will live to, right? Unfortunately, some people die or pass away at the age of 50 or 60 or whatever, some even younger than that. So that would count as a generation. Okay. So in relation to Genesis 15, like, when the Most High told Abram that, know for a surety that, your seed will serve another nation for 400 years. That's 4 generations. Okay, and which went on in biblical history, in world history. It's well known that the children of Israel was enslaved down in the land of Mizraim, not necessarily by that land, but from the last few dynasties that was in that land before they conquered the people of that land, had the children of Israel in bondage, which is Egypt, for 400 years, right? So getting back to that, that's what the Most High was speaking about with Abraham for 4 generations. Okay, our people was in captivity just as they are now, counting all the way from, the 1600s, right? Our people was really being brought over here in the 1400s, but the chattel slavery didn't really officially start to around the early 1600s, right? But our people was coming over here as so-called indentured servants. Okay. Verse 16. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Okay, so keep this name in mind here, the Amorites, okay, which is a Canaanic people, by the way. All right, and it's also letting you know that who enslaved the children of Israel in the so-called land of Egypt, right, which was really Mizraim, okay, a son of Ham. All right, but the Amorites is also a people of Ham from the Canaanic lineage, but the Canaanites was a cursed nation of the Most High, right? So this is letting you know that the sin, which was the iniquity of the Amorites, is not full yet. So that's letting you know down in that land for 400 years who had the children of Israel in captivity, right? Verse 17. And it came to pass that when the sun was set, so like it, when the sun went down, but you can say that too, that is sunset, right? And it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. All right. Verse 18. In the same day, the Most High Power made a covenant, okay, with Abram, saying, unto what? Thy seed, okay, thy seed have I given this land from the river of Mizraim, which is so-called Egypt, onto the great river, the river Euphrates. Okay, so that was the land of Canaan, all right, which was in Africa still, present-day Africa, right? But that was the land of Canaan, from the so-called Nile River, which is the river of Egypt, all the way to the Euphrates and the Tigris, right, in the upper part of the so-called Middle East, right? And then it says here, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites, verse 20, and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaims, verse 21, and the Amorites, all right, just as it says up here. The iniquity of the Amorites are not finished, right? In verse 16, right, and paraphrasing, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. All right, so and you jump back down to 21, it's letting you know the people that's in the land of Canaan, all right, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. All right, so that's letting you know who's in the land of Canaan from the so-called river of Egypt, which is now known as the Nile River, up into the Euphrates and also the Tigris. All right, just like I said, which is in the upper part of the so-called Middle East, right, in the land of Assyria. Okay, so keep that name Ammonites in mind as we go to the book of Exodus chapter 34. Okay, and we're going to start at verse 1, and it read, And the Most High said unto Moses, Hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first. All right, so everyone should know what that is, right? Even if you're a so-called Christian who goes to Sunday's church, you should know what that is when you hear that, right? And I will write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables which thou breakest. Okay, so the Most High said, I will write. All right, so that goes for all of you so-called infidels and non-believers, right, who love to say, well, who wrote the Torah? Who wrote the Bible? That Bible was written by man. The laws of your so-called God was written by man, right? But all throughout the scriptures, in which I'm going to do another video on that today, not today, but on another day, right? Who writ the scriptures? It's written in the Bible. It's written in the scriptures, right? And it's only like a few scriptures, but it's enough to cut you guys to the soul, man, right? So it's letting you know right here that the Most High said, I will write. I'm going to write on those 2 tables of stone, man. Not you, Moses. I'm not going to tell you to write, all right? I'm going to write it with my finger, right? So right here, it's letting you know who wrote the scriptures, man, who wrote the law, okay? The so-called Torah, which is the laws, by the way, right? The Most High wrote that, man, right? Not man, not who you think wrote it, right? The Most High wrote these laws, man, okay? So getting back to the book of Exodus chapter 34. Verse 2. And be ready in the morning, come up in the morning onto Mount Sinai, and present thyself there to me. Okay. In the top of the mount. Verse 3. And no man shall come up with thee, neither let any man be seen throughout all the mount, neither let the flocks nor herds feed before that mount. Okay, so the Most High was serious, right? He was telling Moses, when you come, you make sure that you by yourself, you're lonely, okay, when you coming to see me, right? You're the only one that I'm requesting, okay? Not even Aaron, right? Just you, right? Verse 4. And he hewed 2 tables of stone like unto the first. And Moshe rose up early in the morning and went up onto Mount Sinai as the Most High had commanded him. And he took in his hand the 2 tables of stone. Verse 5. And the Most High descended in a cloud, okay, or in the cloud as it's written here, and stood with him there, and proclaim the name of the Most High power. Okay, so according to the biblical scripture, the clouds is the dust of the Most High's feet. Okay, and that had to be some sight for Moses, right? Because usually when the Most High appears, right, what we see is dark clouds, thunderstorms, right? Lightnings, thunders, right? Strong winds. Okay, so that had to be something for Moses to endure, man. Even in the movie, when you look at the 10 Commandments, okay, when you look at the 10 Commandments, Whenever Moses went up on Mount Sinai, right, you always had this scene where, the winds is going crazy. It's blowing like crazy, man. It's hard. You hear all of the thunders. You hear all of the lightnings, right? That's the Most High, man. When you hear those thunders and stuff like that, that's the Most High's voice. When you see the lightning, that lets you know that the Most High is present, okay? And when you hear the winds, when you feel the winds, those strong winds, 50 miles and better, 75 miles and better, 100 miles and better, right? Those are the angels that's accompanying the Most High, right? The cherubims, the seraphims, okay, the ophanids, right? Those are the ones that's creating the strong winds, right? When you see the hurricanes, when you see the tornadoes, right? And then when you hear the thunder, right? Which is boom, 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 right? That's the Most High's voice, man. That's the Most High's voice. And then when you see the lightnings, right? Those are the lightnings that's coming from the Most High as he's making his grand entrance, right? So you could imagine what Moses was enduring, man. Like he's experiencing this all up front, man, right straight to his face, man. Right? You literally standing under and thunderstorms and lightnings, man, just flashing all over the place. Right? So that must have been something to endure when the Most High, and then he was by himself too, right? It's not like he was with Aaron and his sons or whatever and other Levitical priests. He was by himself enduring all of this himself, man. Right? So strong, man. He had to be fearless, right? But that had to be put in him through the Spirit by the Most High to be that way, because any natural normal human being, man, they couldn't take something like that. Like me personally, I don't even think I can take something like that if I'm up close to something like that, right? You're seeing all of the thunders, the dark crowds, the lightning, all of this stuff, this flashing all over the place. You hear all of this loud bangs, the loud thunders and all of that stuff, the strong winds, right? The average person couldn't handle something like that, right? So you got to take your hat off to Moses, man, because he actually did a lot for the children of Israel, man, right? When he was consulting with the Most High. Okay, that's why the Most High gave him that glory. And then you had the children of Israel. They was actually scared to look at his countenance. They were scared to look at his face, because that's the glory that the Most High gave on to Masha, man, right? So getting back to the scripture here. Verse 5. And the Most High power descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Most High. So that's the thunder there, right? Verse 6. And the Most High power passed by before him and proclaimed, the Most High power, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and what? Truth. All right? So all of this is coming from those thunders, man, right? You could imagine how that sound, right? Just a real bad thunderstorm, right? Your worst thunderstorm that you ever heard, man, right? The Most High's voice was worse than that during that time, man. Like you could just use your imagination. You could picture it, right? Verse 7. Keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity, all right? What is iniquity? Sin. What is sin? The of the Most High's laws, statutes, and commandments, man, right? As it says here, which is the next word, right? Transgression and sin. See, this is how it is when you're in the Spirit, right? You're not even looking at the next words that's written. You already saying it through the Spirit, right? And that will by no means clear the what? The guilty, right? So if you're guilty of committing iniquity, which is the transgression and sin, then you're not going to be cleared, man. They're going to get judged, right? Visiting the iniquity of the what? The fathers upon the children. Okay, it didn't say the iniquities of the mothers, all right, or the women. The iniquity of the fathers, man, okay, upon the children and upon the children's children, okay, which is the grandchildren, all right, onto the third and the fourth generation, all right. So just like I said, that's your example of so-called reincarnation right there. The Most High said he's going to revisit the iniquity of the fathers, okay? Okay, which is the children and the children's children, which is that man's grandchildren, okay? That's 3 generations there. And then he said up into the 3rd and 4th generation, right? So this, like I said, all of this right here ain't coming from how I feel or what I think or how, I, perceive things to be. All of this stuff right here is scriptural, man. All right. So the lineage goes through the dad, man. 3 to 4 generations up. Okay. So like I was saying earlier in the video, if you want to determine who you truly are, you have to go through your dad's lineage from 3 to 4 generations, man. Right. It doesn't have to be the 4th generation, but if it's at least the 3rd generation, if your dad's a so-called African American or black man, right, or from the land of so-called Africa, which is named after Scipio Africanus, really, which is a Roman general. So it's really not Africa, but this is what it's known as today. So that's the reason why I'm using that word. But if your dad, which is your great granddad, is a so-called black man or African American, then that would make you from the so-called tribe of Judah. All right. Or you can be a Benjamite or a Levite. Okay, those were the tribes that was on the west coast of Africa when they was taken from that land in captivity. All right, so if you know your great granddad, all right, if they was an Israelite, then more than likely you're an Israelite. But if you don't know who your great granddad is, or let alone your granddad, then how can you claim that you're Israel, right? Especially if you're very light complected and your hair is not even coarse, man. Like, like, come on, man. So this, like I said, this is the reason why I'm doing this video here, right? You have a lot of mixed breed people that's in our faith talking about their Israel, but they don't even know who their granddad is. Some of them don't even know who their dad is. They're just going off the lineage of their mom, man. And it's because their mom might be a so-called black woman. They're claiming Israel, right? But their dad can be a full-fledged Caucasian, could be a full-fledged so-called Native American, which is Siberians, by the way, right? And they're not even Israel, man. They could be Hamitic, right? So this is the reason why videos like this have to be done, man. Okay, in sincerity and truth, by the way, right?